You must pay $150,000 for mom's funeral. My stepdaughter demanded a luxury ceremony for my wife, who died with her lover while running away. I ignored her and exposed years of fraud and betrayal. The day I got the call from the hospital, I was just there, in my office, focused on contracts. I remember the doctor's voice. It was so distant, so professional, almost robotic. Mr. Herrera, we're sorry to inform you that your wife, Gabriela, and Mr. Rodrigo Sanchez died in a car accident early this morning. Both died on impact. Rodrigo Sanchez. The name hit me. It echoed in my ears like a gong that wouldn't stop ringing. My business partner, my supposed friend for 15 years, the godfather of Camila, my stepdaughter. I hung up the phone. I didn't say a word. I didn't feel the tidal wave of pain people talk about, or even rage. What I felt was this chilling, absolute clarity, like someone had thrown the main switch and lit up every dark corner of a room that had been in shadow for years. Every single piece clicked into place with surgical precision. Gabriela's sudden business trips, the way she'd abruptly cut a call when I walked by, the smug, knowing laugh she'd share with Rodrigo at dinner. It had all been right there, in plain sight. But I had been a coward, choosing the comfortable ignorance over the brutal truth. 2 hours later, Camila practically flew into my office. She didn't knock. My stepdaughter, at 24, was already a younger, sharper, and far more calculating version of her mother. She was wearing this black dress she'd clearly just bought. I actually saw the tag still hanging discreetly from the side. "Matthias, we need to talk about mom's funeral," she announced, and there wasn't a single genuine tear in her perfectly made-up eyes. "I'll take care of everything. Mom would have wanted something elegant, you know, dignified. I'm thinking of the Garden of Remembrance, imported white flowers, a chamber orchestra. About $150,000 should be enough." I just stared at her. I couldn't speak for a moment. Camila had never once called me dad, not even stepfather. To her, I was always Matthias, the guy whose sole purpose was to sign checks so she and her mother could enjoy the cash I generated with my financial consulting firm. "There will be no funeral," I said. It was simple, cold, and final. Her face actually twisted in confusion. "Excuse me? What did you say?" I said, "There will be no funeral. At least, not one that I am financing." Camila managed a nervous, disbelieving laugh, as if I were telling a bad joke. "You're in shock, Matthias. It's totally understandable, but mom deserves a proper farewell. She was your wife, for God's sake." "She was my wife who died in a car with my business partner at 3 o'clock in the morning," I replied, the bitterness tasting like ash in my mouth. "Camila, they were coming from a hotel on the outskirts of the city. Do you honestly think I'm going to organize a funeral to celebrate that?" The color literally drained from her face. You knew?" "I do now. And what's worse, I strongly suspect you've known for a very long time, too." Camila is good, though. She regained her composure with impressive, almost frightening speed. She was a master of manipulation, trained by the best. "Don't be ridiculous. Mom loved you. And even if she didn't, she built this life with you. She has the right to a dignified burial. What are the neighbors going to think? Our friends, the family. They can think the truth is finally coming out." I shot back. I couldn't care less what they think. "This is insane." Camila's voice got louder, harsher. "You are being unbelievably cruel and irrational. Mom made one mistake. Yes, but she deserves dignity in death." And where was this concern for dignity when all of you knew about the affair and not one single person thought to tell me? I asked, looking her right in the eye. A long, guilty silence followed. "That's what I thought," I continued. "Organize whatever you want, but don't count on me or my money for a single thing. I don't need your permission. I'll organize the funeral myself." Camila practically yelled. "And with what money exactly?" The question slammed into her, and she stopped dead. Her eyes narrowed immediately, calculating her next move. "With mom's inheritance. Obviously. She had accounts, properties. That were all in my name." I cut her off, my voice sharp and final. "The house you live in, the car you drive, every single credit card you use. Everything is legally in my name. Camila, your mother never worked a day in the 12 years we were married. Everything she had because I gave it to her." The silence that followed was suffocating, heavy with pure poison. Camila just stared at me as if she were seeing a complete stranger for the first time. And maybe she was. For all those years, I had been the silent, invisible man who just signed checks, while she and Gabriela treated me like a useful, expensive piece of furniture, important for function, but with absolutely zero emotional value. "You were always a resentful man," she finally hissed. "A small man with an inferiority complex. Mom gave you the best of herself, and you're doing this." "Your mother lied to me for 4 years," I stated, completely devoid of emotion. "She cheated on me with my own partner. She probably spent my money on hotels and romantic getaways, and you knew about it. I will not pretend to mourn a person who betrayed me until her very last breath." Camila stood up abruptly, shaking. Her expensive purse slipped from her shoulder and fell to the floor, spilling everything. Among the mess, I saw a crumpled envelope. I quickly picked it up before she could react. It was addressed to Gabriela, and the sender was Rodrigo Sanchez. The date was only 3 weeks ago. Give me that. Now. Camila reached for it. I opened the envelope. Inside was a confirmed reservation for 2 at a luxury resort in the Bahamas. The dates? Next week. The week of our 12th anniversary. They were planning to run away together. I whispered, the finality of the betrayal sinking in. On our anniversary. Camila stayed silent, her face frozen. Her silence was a total, absolute confession. How long did you know about this? I asked, my voice dangerously, terrifyingly calm. What does it matter now? They're dead, she replied with a dismissive wave. The only thing that matters is that we honor their memory properly. At that very moment, the last piece of my old self shattered. It wasn't pain that washed over me, but this cold, exhilarating sense of liberation. Get out of my office, I said, and get out of my house before 6 o'clock this evening. Take only what is legally yours. Everything I bought stays. You can't kick me out. That's my house. It is my house. I bought that property 5 years before I ever met your mother. Check the documents if you want proof. You have until 6. Then, I'm changing the locks. This is illegal. I'll call the police. Go right ahead, I said, already turning back to my computer screen. And while you're at it, explain to them why a 24-year-old woman with absolutely no job or income of her own believes she has a legal right to stay in the property of a man who is not her biological father and with whom she has no legal ties. Camila opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. The brutal, simple legal implications of her reality finally penetrated her rage. For years, she had lived a luxury lifestyle based solely on her mother's sham marriage to me. Now, that marriage had ended in the most definitive way possible. You're a monster, she whispered, pure hatred in her eyes. I am a man who finally stopped being an idiot. I replied, not even looking up. 6 o'clock, Camila. Not a minute more. She left, slamming the door so hard the walls vibrated. That night, at 6:05 p.m., I called the locksmith. By 7 o'clock, the locks on the house were changed. Camila had come and gone, taking 2 suitcases of clothes and hurling a stream of insults that I simply ignored from behind the thick door. When she was finally gone, I walked through the house that was finally only mine. 12 years of a marriage, of my life, reduced to just empty spaces and silence. But for the first time in forever, that silence didn't feel heavy. It felt free. The next day, the calls began. First, it was Gabriela's mother, hysterical and sobbing into the phone. Matthias, son, we need to talk about the funeral arrangements. Camila says you're refusing to. Camila is right. I cut her off. There will be no funeral financed by me. You are absolutely free to organize whatever you want, with your own resources. But Gabriela was your wife. You have a responsibility. Gabriela died with her lover in a hotel, I stated, the calmness in my voice frightening even to me. My only responsibility was to a faithful wife, and that woman ceased to exist a long time ago. The crying immediately escalated into outraged shouts, and then vague legal threats. I hung up. Then came Gabriela's brother, Daniel, trying the rational approach. Matthias, I get that you're hurting, but you have to think about the family name. Think about how this looks. Gabriela made a mistake, yes, but she deserves dignity in death. Where was this sudden concern for dignity when all of you knew about the affair and not one single person thought to tell me anything? I asked. A long, guilty silence followed. That's what I thought. I continued. Organize whatever you want, but do not count on me or my money. The calls kept coming for 3 straight days. Relatives, mutual friends, even the parish priest of the church Gabriela would occasionally grace with her presence. All with the same message: forgive, forget, be the bigger man. None of them, absolutely none, acknowledged the fundamental betrayal, the years of deceit, the complicity of all of them in keeping me in the dark. I gave them the same cold answer: no. On the 4th day, Camila showed up at my office again. This time, there was no expensive black dress or perfect makeup. She was wearing old jeans and a cheap sweatshirt, her hair pulled back messily. She looked small, almost vulnerable. Of course, I knew it was an act. Camila was too much her mother's daughter to show real vulnerability. May I sit down, Matthias? She asked, her voice soft. I nodded, curious to see what new strategy she was going to deploy. I've been thinking, she began, folding her hands in her lap like a proper, penitent girl. You're right. Mom hurt you. And yes, we all hurt you by not telling you the truth. I understand you're angry. Then she looked up, her eyes glistening with carefully controlled tears. But she was my mother, Matthias, the only mother I'll ever have. And I know I wasn't the best daughter to you. But for 12 years, you were the closest thing I had to a father. Doesn't that count for anything in your heart? I studied her face, searching, desperately searching, for any flicker of genuine sincerity. I found none. How much do you need? I asked, cutting right through the performance. The mask cracked for a second. What? For the funeral? Tell me the exact figure you need. I didn't come here for money. Camila sighed dramatically. We both know exactly why you came. Tell me the number." She swallowed hard, recalculating on the spot. $50,000 would be enough? Something simple, but still dignified. "And after the funeral, where do you plan to live?" Her eyes lit up with renewed hope. I thought maybe we could reach an agreement. I could stay in the house to help with. "No," I said, and the hope died instantly. But I continued. "I'll make you one offer, and one only. I'll give you $25,000, $15,000 for a modest funeral, and $10,000 for you to rent a place and get settled. In return, you will sign a document, waiving any future claims on my property, my income, or anything I own. Understand?" $25,000? She repeated, completely incredulous. "You spend more than that on a single suit." "That is my offer. Take it or leave it. Mom gave you the best years of her life." "Your mother lied to me during the best years of my life." I corrected her, my patience running thin. "There is a massive difference. $25,000 or nothing. You have until tomorrow to decide." She sprang up, the false vulnerability gone, replaced by pure rage. "I'll sue you. I'll find a way to." "Go ahead and try," I said. "But in the meantime, you'll need money to live, to eat. That money will have to come from somewhere, and it won't be from me unless you accept my offer." I left her with that brutal reality and turned back to my work, ignoring her until she finally stormed out. That night, alone in the enormous house, I poured a whiskey, sat on the terrace, and looked at the stars. They shone, indifferent to my pain. I thought about the 12 years I had thrown away on a life that was revealed to be a complete farce. I thought about Rodrigo, my partner, the man I'd known since college, who had stood at my wedding and dined at my table hundreds of times while plotting this colossal betrayal. But the strangest thing was the lack of heartbreak. I felt something cleaner, something colder. I felt an absolute, final sense of closure. My phone vibrated. A message from Camila. "I accept your offer. When can I pick up the money?" I actually smiled into the darkness. Of course, she accepted. She had no other choice. I replied, "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bring your ID. My lawyer will have the documents ready to sign." Another vibration. "Lawyer? Don't you trust me?" "No," I wrote, the words simple and brutal. "I'll never trust anyone in your family again." There was no response after that. The next day, Camila signed the documents without even reading the full content. Her immediate, pressing greed completely overshadowed any need for legal caution. My lawyer, Ricardo Torres, explained in simple terms what she was giving up: a total waiver of any present or future claims on my assets. She nodded mechanically, her eyes fixed entirely on the large check waiting on the desk. The moment the money was in her hands, she left without a single word of goodbye. Ricardo looked at me with a blend of admiration and genuine concern. "Matthias, are you really sure about this? I know they betrayed you, but this is so incredibly harsh." "Harsher than living a lie for 12 years. I asked. "Harsher than discovering that the person sleeping next to you was plotting to run away with another man on your anniversary?" He had no answer for that. Gabriella's funeral was held 3 days later at a modest funeral home miles away. I didn't go. Instead, I spent that day signing the final paperwork to dissolve the business partnership with the estate of Rodrigo Sanchez. His heirs would get their legally stipulated share, sure, but I would maintain total control of the company I had built, mostly through my own sweat and vision. That night, out of some morbid, sick curiosity, I checked social media. I saw the funeral pictures. It was exactly what $25,000 could buy: modest, sparse, and utterly sad. I recognized a few of Gabriella's distant relatives, a handful of mutual friends. Camila was front and center in every shot, dressed in black, sobbing dramatically, the absolute picture of the devastated daughter. The comments section was, predictably, a mess of outrage. "Where is the husband? What a shame the family had to pay for this." The true character of people is revealed in moments like these. I closed the app. I felt absolutely nothing. Let them think whatever they wanted. The real truth would come out eventually, or it wouldn't. It didn't matter to me anymore. I was done caring about the petty opinions of people who had kept silent about the affair for years. What I did not expect was for the truth to explode into the public sphere so soon, and in such a terrifying way. A week after the funeral, I got a call from an unknown number. A woman with a trembling voice identified herself as Monica Sanchez, Rodrigo's wife. "Mr. Herrera, I need to talk to you. It's urgent." I agreed, mostly out of a detached curiosity. We met at a neutral coffee shop far away from our usual haunts. Monica was elegant, in her 40s, with perfectly coiffed brown hair and a tailored suit that screamed old money. But her eyes were horribly red and swollen, and her hands shook as she raised her coffee cup. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice strained. "I know this must be strange for you, but I found something after the accident. While I was going through Rodrigo's things, I found this." She slid a heavy manila envelope across the table to me. I opened it cautiously. Inside were years of bank statements, hotel receipts, printed text messages, the undeniable, brutal, documented evidence of an affair that had lasted not weeks or months, but years. For years, to be exact, she said. For years. I repeated the number aloud, feeling it sink into my chest like a cold, heavy stone. Since before Rodrigo and I were married, Monica confirmed, her voice finally breaking. He lied to me from the start. Our wedding, our children. It was all a lie while he was having this relationship with your wife. I reviewed the documents, my hands shaking uncontrollably now. Receipts for ridiculously expensive restaurants where I had never taken Gabriella. Hotel reservations on dates she swore she was visiting her mother. Bank transfers from a joint account she shared with Rodrigo to an account I didn't recognize. There's more, Monica said, pulling out a second envelope. I found a hidden phone in his office. He only used it to communicate with her. The messages are explicit. They were planning to divorce both of us right after their Bahamas vacation. Rodrigo was going to take half of our money, and Gabriella was planning to claim an inheritance that supposedly belonged to her from her family. Gabriella had no inheritance, I said immediately, still numb. Her family has absolutely no money. I know, Monica replied bitterly. That's why I started digging. I found out they were planning to forge documents, invent some story about a distant aunt who had passed away, all to justify the huge sums of money Rodrigo was planning to give her from our accounts. The sheer magnitude of the deception paralyzed me. It wasn't just infidelity. It was an intricate, elaborate conspiracy, a financial scam designed to methodically strip both Monica and me of our resources so they could start a perfect new life together. Why are you showing me this? I finally asked. Monica looked me right in the eye, and her resolve returned. Because I have 2 young children who are one day going to ask why their father died with another woman. And because your wife's family is running around spreading rumors that you're a heartless monster who abandoned your wife in death. I thought you deserved to know the full, ugly truth. And I thought that maybe you'd want to help me make sure that truth actually comes out. What exactly are you proposing? I have access to everything. For years of messages, photos, plans. Rodrigo was maniacally meticulous about documenting everything, probably for some twisted legal leverage in his eventual divorce from me. If you agree, we can make all this information public. Not for petty revenge, she quickly emphasized, but just for the truth. So that our families, our friends, the entire community knows exactly who Gabriella and Rodrigo truly were. I pictured Camila, Gabriella's whole judgmental family, everyone who had dared to call me cruel and heartless. I remembered the vile comments on social media, the looks of profound judgment I was receiving everywhere I went. Let's do it, I said. Over the next 2 weeks, Monica and I worked side by side with our respective lawyers to compile every piece of evidence until it was absolutely irrefutable and legally sound. My lawyer, Ricardo, initially argued against it, saying it was unnecessary and would only prolong my pain. But when he saw the sheer scope of the deception, when he read the messages where Gabriella openly mocked me, where she called Rodrigo her true love, while detailing plans to extract maximum money from both marriages, he changed his mind completely. This is not revenge, Matthias, he finally conceded. This is necessary self-defense. We decided to release the information in carefully managed phases. First, we sent copies of the most damning documents directly to the closest relatives of both parties. Gabriella's mother, her brother Daniel, Rodrigo's parents, his siblings. No comments, no explanations, just the pure, raw evidence. The reactions were immediate and chaotic. Gabriella's mother called me, weeping hysterically. This can't be real. My daughter wasn't like this. You're making it up. The bank statements don't lie, Mrs. Ramirez. The text messages have verifiable dates. The hotel receipts have their signatures. Do you want me to send you the pictures they took together? The ones Rodrigo kept on his secret phone. She slammed the phone down without answering. Daniel, Gabriella's brother, reacted differently. He called my office and insisted on seeing me in person. When he arrived, he looked absolutely devastated, like he'd aged 10 years in a week. I have to apologize, he said immediately, without preamble. At the funeral, I said terrible things about you. I convinced everyone that you were a heartless man. And all this time, they were the liars. I should have believed you when you said Gabriella died with her lover. I thought you were being dramatic, that the grief was making you exaggerate. I never, ever imagined it was this calculated. 4 years of cheating isn't just a mistake, I said, my voice hardening. Those were years of conscious decisions, elaborate lies, and premeditated betrayal. Daniel slumped into the chair in front of my desk. What happens now? Are you going to make this public, beyond the family? Monica and I are discussing our options. I would understand if you did, he admitted, looking at the floor. But please think about Camila. She's already lost her mother. If this goes public, her whole reputation will be completely destroyed by association. Camila knew, I said, the words ice cold. I found proof in her purse. She knew about the affair and never breathed a word to me. She protected her mother while treating me like an ATM machine. Daniel just stared at me, speechless. 2 days later, Monica's mother published a lengthy post on her social media. She was an older, highly respected woman in the community with thousands of followers from her charity work. Her post never named names, but anyone who knew the situation understood instantly who she meant. When someone dies, we tend to canonize them, to conveniently forget their flaws and remember only the good times. But sometimes, honoring someone's memory means perpetuating a lie that only harms the innocent. My son-in-law was not the man we thought he was, and the woman he died with was not who she appeared to be, either. They both built entire lives based on lies, mercilessly hurting their faithful spouses while planning a future together, financed with the very money of those they betrayed. The truth hurts, yes, but the lie hurts far, far more in the long run. The post went instantly viral in our small community. The comments exploded. A few people defended the memory of Gabriella and Rodrigo, arguing the dead deserve peace. But others, especially the genuine friends of mine or Monica's, began sharing their own ignored suspicions, small inconsistencies that now made terrifying sense. Camila called me that night, utterly hysterical. How could you? You completely destroyed my mother's memory. People are saying the most horrible things. People are saying the truth. I replied, my voice completely calm. Your mother built her own reputation with her own actions. I just made sure those actions were finally known. You are a monster. A vengeful, heartless man. I am a man who finally got tired of being treated like an idiot. I countered. You knew, Camila. You knew about the affair and kept me in the dark. Don't you dare feign outrage now. I had no concrete proof. Just suspicions. You had enough information to tell me something, but you chose to protect your mother because it was convenient for you. As long as I kept paying the bills, as long as I maintained your lavish lifestyle, my happiness simply didn't matter. The silence that followed was long, heavy, and crushing. I can't even stand to look at you, she finally whispered, her voice cracking with defeat. I hope I never see you again in my entire life. The feeling is mutual, I replied, and I hung up. The next morning, Monica and I took the final step. We published a joint statement through our lawyers, addressed to the local media. It was not sensationalist or vengeful. It was simply factual, a meticulous timeline of the deception, backed by all the documentary evidence, explaining why both of us had made the decisions we had regarding the funerals, the inheritances, and the management of our assets. The local paper ran the story in its community news section. It wasn't a front-page scandal, but it was absolutely enough. The truth was finally out there for anyone who cared to look. The consequences were immediate. Gabriella's relatives, who had been harassing me with daily calls, suddenly stopped contacting me. Mutual friends who had judged me began sending timid, apologetic text messages. Rodrigo's family, devastated by their own shocking revelation, remained completely silent. But the most shocking reaction came from where I least expected it. 3 weeks after publishing the truth, I received a certified letter. The sender was a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a lawsuit. Camila was suing me for defamation, emotional distress, and loss of economic opportunities due to the damage to her mother's reputation. Ricardo almost burst out laughing when I showed him the documents. This is going absolutely nowhere, Matthias. You have documentary evidence of everything. Plus, she signed a full waiver of any claim. Can she argue that the waiver was obtained under emotional duress? She can try, but she will not win. And if she decides to push this too hard, we can countersue for the huge debts Gabriella accumulated on all those cards you paid for. Debts that were legally her responsibility, but that you always covered. We could claim that money from Gabriella's estate, which technically would now belong to Camila as the sole heir. How much are we talking about? Ricardo flipped through his files from the last 12 years, calculating conservatively. Approximately $320,000 in Gabriella's personal expenses that you covered, which weren't strictly necessary for the maintenance of the household. Designer clothes, jewelry, spa trips, beauty treatments. All documented, all with receipts. A cold, exhilarating idea began to form in my mind. What if we let her proceed with the lawsuit, and then we countersue for everything? Ricardo smiled slowly, dangerously. You'd end up with a full-blown public trial that would put every sordid detail of the affair on the public record. Every text message, every hotel receipt, every single bank transfer. Are you absolutely certain you want that, Matthias? Camila had her chance to accept the $25,000 and disappear with some shred of dignity. I said, a stone settling in my gut. If she wants a fight, I will give her the biggest fight of her life. Over the next 2 months, the legal process dragged on. Camila's lawyer presented weak, whiny arguments about the emotional impact of my cruel revelations about her deceased mother. Ricardo responded by filing the complete evidence of the affair, proving that there could be no defamation when the truth was backed by irrefutable, hard proof. But the real bombshell came the moment we filed our countersuit. We didn't just claim the $320,000 in frivolous expenses. We also included a claim for fraud. We argued that Gabriella had obtained those funds under false pretenses, meticulously maintaining a fraudulent marriage while actively planning to leave it for another man. Camila's lawyer desperately tried to withdraw her original lawsuit. Ricardo refused to allow it without a complete, total settlement that favored us entirely. Finally, 6 months after Gabriella's death, Camila and I met face-to-face in a mediation room. She looked utterly haggard, exhausted. The immense pressure of maintaining her mother's charade, combined with the rapidly growing legal costs, had clearly taken a monumental toll. "What do you want from me, Matthias?" she asked, her voice tired and defeated. "I want you to withdraw your lawsuit with prejudice, meaning you can never, ever sue me again for these matters," I stated. "I want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement about any aspect of my private or financial life. And I want a full, public apology for all the false accusations you made against me. And if I do all that, I will withdraw my countersuit. I won't seek the $320,000. You can go on with your life without owing me a single thing." Camila looked at me, pure, unadulterated hatred burning in her eyes. "How can you be this cold? My mother is dead." "Your mother betrayed me for 4 straight years," I replied, unflinching. "She planned to rob me, lie to me, and abandon me. And you knew everything. So do not lecture me about coldness, Camila. I learned from the best, your mother." She signed the documents without even reading them, just as she had signed the waiver months earlier. Some habits, I guess, never die. Camila's public apology appeared 3 days later, a brief, clearly forced post on her social media. "I would like to retract previous comments made about Matthias Herrera. I acted based on incomplete information and raw emotion, not facts. I regret any damage caused to his reputation." It didn't mention her mother. It didn't mention the affair. It was the bare minimum required by our legal agreement, but it was enough. The comments were divided, predictably. Some supported her, claiming she was forced. Others pointed out that she was finally admitting the truth. I didn't comment or react. I simply let it exist as one more public record of how it had all, finally, ended. With the legal matter settled, I expected some kind of profound, final sense of closure. But life, I was learning, rarely offers an ending as neat and tidy as you expect. 2 weeks after Camila's public apology, I was working late in my office when I got a highly unexpected visitor. The receptionist called me on the intercom, her voice laced with nerves. "Mr. Herrera, there's a woman here who insists on seeing you. She says it's urgent. Her name is Patricia Ruiz." The name meant nothing to me. "Did she say what it's about?" "She says it's about Gabriella. She says you'll really want to hear what she has to say." I almost refused. I had truly had enough of surprises related to my late wife. But that terrible curiosity won. "Send her in." Patricia Ruiz was a woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled into a severe bun, and a face that showed both grim determination and discomfort. She carried a professional briefcase and moved with the assured confidence of someone used to a corporate environment. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment," she began after a firm handshake. "I know this is highly unusual, but I work for the central bank, specifically in the financial fraud investigation department." My stomach immediately seized up. "Fraud investigation?" "Don't worry, you are not being investigated," she clarified quickly. "But your late wife was. Or, more accurately, she and Rodrigo Sanchez were." She sat down without waiting for an invitation and opened her briefcase, extracting a thick, intimidating folder. "For about 2 years now, we have been investigating a highly sophisticated money laundering ring operating through a number of shell companies. During our investigation, the names of Gabriela Ramirez de Herrera and Rodrigo Sanchez kept appearing repeatedly in suspicious transactions." "Money laundering?" I repeated, feeling the world tilt beneath my feet. "What in God's name are you talking about?" Patricia slid several documents across my desk. Rodrigo Sanchez had access to very significant investment funds through his financial consulting firm. Over the last 4 years, he systematically diverted small amounts of money from multiple client accounts into fictitious companies that he and your wife created. The amounts were small enough not to immediately trigger alarms, but cumulatively, we are talking about approximately $2,800,000. The number was so utterly ridiculous I almost laughed out loud. $2.8 million? Rodrigo had a successful company. Why would he need to steal? Because his company wasn't nearly as successful as it looked, Patricia explained patiently. Rodrigo had enormous gambling debts, approximately $700,000, that he owed to private lenders, the kind of lenders who do not accept defaults. He needed money fast, and apparently convinced Gabriella to help him create it. I reviewed the documents with trembling hands. There were bank statements from accounts I'd never seen, all in the name of LLCs I'd never heard of, but on several documents, as a registered agent or secondary signatory, Gabriella's name was right there. She was actively involved, Patricia continued, her voice clinical. She wasn't simply the ignorant girlfriend. Gabriella opened several of these accounts, signed incorporation documents, even made wire transfers herself. Her fingerprints are all over this operation. Why are you only telling me this now? I demanded. Why not before? Because the investigation was still ongoing when they both passed away. Their death complicated the case. We can't prosecute dead people, but we have a legal obligation to recover the stolen funds to return them to the victims. And this is where the situation becomes relevant to you, Mr. Herrera. She pulled out yet another document. Gabriela used your personal information in several of these documents. Your social security number, your address, even copies of your driver's license. Essentially, she implicated you in the fraud without your knowledge or consent. The rage I had bottled up for months finally erupted in a hot, blinding wave. You're telling me that not only did she cheat on me, but she also used my identity to commit federal crimes. That is exactly what I am saying. And there's another thing. Some of the stolen money was actually transferred into joint accounts you shared with Gabriela. Not huge amounts, maybe $20,000 or $30,000 in total, mixed in with legitimate deposits to make them look normal. But technically, that stolen money passed through accounts in your name. I never, ever authorized that. I know, she interrupted me gently. We've meticulously reviewed your transaction patterns, your tax returns, everything. It is clear you had no knowledge of these activities. But legally, the situation is incredibly complicated. The stolen funds passed through accounts in your name. The victims of the fraud could potentially sue you to recover those funds. I sank back into my chair, feeling the devastating weight of this new, final revelation. What do you need from me? I need your absolute, full cooperation in this investigation. Access to all your bank records from the last 5 years, any documents Gabriela might have kept in the house, any emails, any communication that might help us trace the money. In return, we will work with you to ensure that the victims fully understand that you were just as much a victim in this scheme. And if some of those victims still decide to sue me? Patricia sighed, rubbing her forehead. It's possible, yes. But with our complete documentation showing that you had absolutely no involvement in the fraud, your chances of prevailing legally are minimal. Still, defending yourself could be a long and very costly process. Of course it could, because Gabriela, even from the grave, was still finding new ways to destroy my life. Over the next few weeks, my house became a forensic crime scene. Bank investigators, forensic auditors, and federal agents crawled through every single document Gabriela had ever touched. And they found more than they expected. In boxes stored way up in the attic, they discovered fake contracts, fictitious invoices, and corporate documents for companies that had never actually operated. Gabriela had been terrifyingly meticulous in her criminality, keeping perfect records of absolutely everything, perhaps as insurance against Rodrigo, or maybe just because it was in her nature to be organized, even in fraud. They also found something else, a diary. It wasn't some silly teenage diary filled with intimate thoughts. It was a cold, clinical record of transactions, dates, and amounts. But tucked away in the margins, Gabriela had scribbled notes, small comments that revealed her true, ugly thoughts about absolutely everything. Matthias signed the refinancing papers today without reading. Typical. $20,000 more available to move. Mom called me worried because I haven't visited her in months. I told her I was busy with volunteer work. She believed everything. These idiots always believe everything. Rodrigo is pushing to speed up the plan. He says his creditors are getting impatient. I told him to slow down or he'll ruin everything. He's emotional. I'm practical. That's why this will work. And the most damning one of all, Camila suspects something. I saw her looking at the bank statements when she thought I wasn't watching. I'll have to talk to her. Make sure she understands that this benefits all of us. Matthias has more than enough. He won't even miss what we take. I read every page of that diary with a stomach-churning mix of horror and morbid fascination. This was the real Gabriela, stripped bare. A woman who saw our entire marriage as nothing more than an economic opportunity, who planned every move with surgical precision, and who had involved her own daughter in the conspiracy. Patricia found the diary invaluable. This documents clear, undeniable premeditation. If she were alive, this would guarantee a conviction. As it is, it helps us track exactly where the money went. It turned out that most of the stolen money had been wired to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Gabriela and Rodrigo had meticulously planned to access those funds after divorcing Monica and me, settle down in some country with no extradition treaty, and live in luxury off the stolen money for the rest of their lives. The accident had ended that vile plan abruptly. The money was still there, completely inaccessible without the passwords and access codes that had died with them. We'll recover most of it eventually, Patricia assured me. But it's going to take a lot of time. Offshore banks are not known for their speedy cooperation. While the financial investigation ground on, another problem surfaced. Rodrigo's clients, the people who had been mercilessly defrauded, began to organize. They formed a group of 27 individuals who had collectively lost $2,800,000. And even though most of them understood that I was a victim, 3 of them decided to sue me anyway. Their arguments were technically valid, even if morally bankrupt. Some of the stolen money had passed through accounts in my name. Therefore, they argued, I had a responsibility to return it. The fact that I was completely unaware the money was stolen was, according to their heartless lawyers, entirely irrelevant. Ricardo was incandescent with fury when he received the lawsuits. This is absolutely absurd. You have crystal clear documentation that you were defrauded. Gabriella's diary completely exonerates you. But the money passed through my accounts. I reminded him, the simple truth of it frustrating me to no end. Technically, they have an argument. A very weak argument that won't prevail in court, but defending it will cost us untold amounts of time and money. He was right. We would eventually win, but the process would be utterly exhausting. And there was one more thought I couldn't shake. These were real people who had genuinely lost everything. They had entrusted Rodrigo with their retirement savings, their children's college funds, their life savings, and they had all lost it because of the obscene greed of two people I had had the misfortune to know. I made a decision that utterly floored Ricardo. I want to establish a restitution fund. What? Matthias, you have absolutely no legal obligation to. It's not about legal obligation. I cut him off, finally realizing what felt right. It's about doing what is right. These people were victimized by Gabriella and Rodrigo. I was also victimized by them. I am not going to let Gabriella turn me into yet another instrument of her damage. If I can help these people recover even a fraction of what they lost, I will do it. We're talking about potentially millions of dollars, Matthias. I have the resources. My company is thriving. I have no dependents. I have no significant debt. And frankly, after finding out stolen money was in my accounts, I do not feel comfortable keeping a single cent that might be contaminated. Over the next few weeks, we worked with Patricia and the bank to meticulously calculate the exact amount of stolen money that had passed through my personal and corporate accounts. The final figure was $250,000 over the 4-year period. I established a fund with that full amount, plus an additional $50,000 of my own money as a gesture of goodwill. The money would be distributed proportionally among all the fraud victims based on their losses. It wouldn't come close to covering their full losses, but it was something, and it was the honest thing to do. When I announced my intention to the plaintiffs through Ricardo, 2 of them immediately withdrew their lawsuits and even sent me letters of apology. The third, a bitter, broken man named Ernesto Campos, who had lost his daughter's entire college fund, insisted on pressing forward with the lawsuit anyway. He wants blood, Ricardo explained, his face grim. He doesn't care about the money anymore. He just desperately needs someone to pay. And since Rodrigo is dead, you are the closest, most convenient target. Then let him proceed, I said, utterly tired of fighting. We'll present our defense, and we'll let the judge decide. Campos's case finally went to court 6 months later. It was a swift, one-day proceeding where we presented Gabriella's diary, Patricia's detailed testimony about the fraud investigation, and my own comprehensive financial records, which proved my complete ignorance of the criminal activities. The judge ruled decisively in my favor after less than an hour of deliberation. It is clear to this court, he announced from the bench, that Mr. Herrera was a victim in this fraudulent scheme just as much as any of Rodrigo Sanchez's clients. There is absolutely no legal basis to hold him responsible for crimes committed without his knowledge or consent. Campos stormed out of the courtroom, yelling. I left, exhausted but profoundly relieved. That night, alone in my quiet house, I poured the whiskey that had become my nightly ritual and sat on the terrace. It had been nearly a year since Gabriella's death. A year filled with shocking revelations, endless betrayals, legal battles, and the slow, grinding process of rebuilding. My phone vibrated. It was Monica Sanchez. I saw the news about your court case, she said. Congratulations. Thanks. How are your kids holding up? Therapy is helping. I told them the truth about their father, adapted for their age, of course. They deserve to know why their family fell apart, and I had to tell them. How did they react? Better than I expected, actually. Kids are so resilient, and honestly, I think they already sensed something was fundamentally wrong. They just needed confirmation that it wasn't just their imagination. We talked for over an hour about our mutual recoveries, about the ongoing legal battles to finally recover the stolen offshore funds, about the sheer effort it takes to rebuild a life after everything you thought you knew turned out to be a cruel, elaborate lie. You know what the strangest thing is? Monica asked just before hanging up. I don't actually miss Rodrigo. I miss the idea of who I thought he was. But the real man, the liar, the thief, I feel absolutely nothing for him. It's like he actually died years ago, the moment the affair began, and I'm just now realizing it. I understand exactly what you mean, I replied. After hanging up, I thought about Camila. I hadn't heard a single word from her since her forced apology months ago. Out of morbid curiosity, I checked her social media. Her profile was now set to private, but her profile picture showed a woman who looked thinner, much more tired. The public comments on her old posts were disabled. I wondered if she had learned anything at all from this nightmare. If she had realized that her mother's actions hadn't just destroyed me, but had completely ruined her own life by association. Probably not. Some people, I knew, are simply incapable of learning. What I didn't know was that I had learned. I learned that blind love is a dangerous, lethal thing. That trust must be painstakingly earned and verified. That every little ignored red flag eventually becomes a complete, catastrophic disaster. But I also learned something else. that I could survive this, that I could rebuild, that I didn't need the hollow validation of people who had never truly valued me to begin with. My life slowly settled into a new, deliberate rhythm. Focused work, the weekly therapy sessions that Ricardo had insisted I take, and the occasional, comfortable dinners with Monica and her children, where we shared the strange, quiet brotherhood of victims who truly understand one another's pain. 18 months after Gabriella's death, the financial investigation finally concluded. Patricia called me with the news. "We recovered $1.6 million from the offshore accounts," she announced triumphantly. "It's not the full amount, but it's very significant. After all the legal and administrative costs, the victims will receive approximately 60% of their original losses." "That's much better than I ever expected," I admitted. "There is one more thing," she said, her voice dropping slightly. "During the final investigation, we found irrefutable evidence that Camila not only knew about the fraud, but she had received money directly from the stolen accounts. Approximately $85,000 over 3 years, transferred as gifts from her mother." My stomach immediately sank. $85,000? Payments for her car, her apartment, trips, credit cards, all legal transfers. She could potentially be held responsible for returning that money to the victims. Is she going to be prosecuted? Patricia sighed again. That is entirely up to the prosecutor. Technically, she received stolen money, but proving she knew it was stolen is very complicated. She could easily argue that she thought it was just her mother being generous. But you and I both know she knew more than she's admitting. I know, but knowing something and proving it in a court of law are two completely different things. I've referred the case to the prosecutor. They will decide if there's enough evidence to proceed with charges. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a number I instantly recognized as Camila's. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. I almost let it go to voicemail, but that cursed curiosity won again. "Matthias," her voice sounded small, utterly terrified. "I need to talk to you. Please, please don't hang up." "What do you want, Camila?" "I received a subpoena from the prosecutor. They say I received stolen money, that I could actually go to prison." Her voice broke completely. "Matthias, I didn't know. I swear to you. I thought Mom was just being generous." "Do you honestly expect me to believe that now? You found the Bahamas reservation. You knew about the affair. And now you want me to believe you didn't suspect the money was stolen." "I knew about the affair," she admitted, sobbing heavily now. "But I didn't know about the fraud. They are different things. I would never, ever have knowingly accepted stolen money." "But you did knowingly accept tens of thousands of dollars while you watched your mother destroy my marriage," I said, my voice cutting like glass. I fail to see much of a moral difference between those two things. "Please. The prosecutor says if I cooperate fully, if I return the money, I might avoid charges. But I don't have $85,000, Matthias. I spent every penny of it. If they prosecute me, I'll have a criminal record. I'll never get a decent job. My life will be ruined." "Your mother ruined many lives, Camila, including yours," I told her, without an ounce of sympathy left. "Maybe it's finally time you face the consequences of being complicit in her actions." "I wasn't complicit. I was just her daughter, trying to maintain a relationship with her." "You were a grown woman, from 21 to 24, happily accepting tens of thousands of dollars while you stood by and watched your mother destroy my life. You could have said something. You could have done the right thing. You chose not to." A long, desolate silence followed. Then, in a voice so broken I barely recognized it, she asked, "If I testify against Mom, if I tell them everything I know about the affair and the fraud, will you talk to the prosecutor for me? Will you tell them I cooperated?" I thought very carefully before answering. "What else do you know that you haven't told us?" "Names." Mom mentioned other partners. Other people involved, not just Rodrigo. There were at least 2 other people helping them move the money. I could identify them. This was a massive new development. "What kind of people?" "An accountant, I think, and someone who worked at a bank." Mom never said specific names in front of me, but I overheard conversations. I know details that could really help find them. I called Patricia the second I hung up with Camila. She was extremely interested. If there are really more people involved, that would significantly expand the scope of this case. "Do you think she's telling the truth?" "Camila lies when it suits her," I said, "but she's utterly desperate now. And desperation sometimes breeds honesty. Arrange a meeting. I'll be there with the prosecutor. If her information is genuinely valuable, she might be able to negotiate immunity or at least reduce charges." The meeting took place in the prosecutor's offices 3 days later. Camila showed up with a public defender who looked just as exhausted as she did. She had lost noticeable weight. Her eyes were dark with worry, and all the arrogance that had once defined her was gone, replaced by pure, crippling fear. For 3 grueling hours, Camila detailed everything she knew. She described conversations she'd overheard between Gabriella and Rodrigo. She identified an accountant named Fernando Rivas who had apparently helped create all the shell companies. She mentioned a woman named Lucia who worked in a bank's international transfers department and who had facilitated the massive offshore movements. Why did you withhold all this information until now? The prosecutor, a stern man named Arturo Mendoza, asked sharply. I was scared, Camilo admitted, tears streaming down her face. Scared that if I said anything, Mom would end up in prison. Scared of losing all the money she was giving me. Scared of being totally alone. I made the wrong choice. I know that now. Patricia and the prosecutor exchanged a look. We will need to verify every word of this information, Patricia said finally. If it turns out to be accurate, we will absolutely discuss immunity. Over the next few weeks, the investigators pursued Camila's leads. They turned out to be gold. Fernando Rivas was quickly located operating a small accounting firm in a suburb. When he was confronted with the overwhelming evidence, he immediately broke down and confessed everything. He had created 22 different shell companies for Gabriela and Rodrigo in exchange for cash under the table. Lucia Vargas was harder to find. She had resigned from her banking position 6 months earlier and had vanished. But the bank records Patricia obtained through a court order clearly showed that she had facilitated $200,000 in transfers to the Cayman Islands. An arrest warrant was immediately issued. With this powerful new information, Gabriela and Rodrigo's criminal network was revealed to be far more extensive than anyone had dared to imagine. They weren't just two greedy lovers. They had been the cold, calculated center of a major fraud operation involving multiple accomplices and victims across 3 different countries. Your wife was a sophisticated criminal, Matthias, Patricia told me during one of our updates, her voice awed. Not some amateur who made a mistake. This was meticulously planned for years. The revelation should have completely shattered me. Instead, it freed me from the last, desperate illusion I might have been clinging to. That maybe, just maybe, Gabriela had loved me once. She hadn't. She probably never did. I had been nothing more than a mark, a source of endless funds, and a respectable cover for her disgusting criminal activities. Accepting that brutal truth hurt far less than I expected, probably because I had already mourned the woman I thought I had known long, long ago. Camila received full immunity in exchange for her complete testimony. Prosecutor Mendoza called me personally to inform me. I know this may not feel like true justice to you, Mr. Herrera, he said, but her cooperation was absolutely crucial. Without her, Rivas and Vargas would still be free, and the victims would never have recovered anything. I understand, I replied. I just sincerely hope Camila has actually learned something from this. Between you and me, I think she has. I saw her in court during Rivas's hearings. She looked utterly shattered. Sometimes, consequences teach better than any sermon. Fernando Rivas's trial became front-page local news. The media covered every shocking detail of the fraud, the network of shell companies, the heartbreaking victims who had lost their life savings. Gabriela's name was repeated constantly, not as the poor dead wife who deserved mourning, but as the calculating criminal who had ruthlessly orchestrated the scheme alongside Rodrigo. Rivas was sentenced to 8 long years in prison. Lucia Vargas was finally located in Costa Rica and extradited. Her trial was pending. Monica and I were invited to a final meeting with all the fraud victims after the recovered funds were fully distributed. Some people thanked us tearfully for our cooperation. Others simply nodded, still quietly processing their massive losses. Ernesto Campos, the bitter man who had sued me, approached me right at the end. He looked older now, terribly tired. I want to apologize, Mr. Herrera, he said bluntly, his voice rough. For the lawsuit, for blaming you when it wasn't your fault. I was just angry and I desperately needed an enemy. You were convenient. I understand, I said, and I meant it. We all need someone to blame when we're hurting that much. My daughter is going to college anyway, he continued, a tiny spark of pride in his eyes. Not the one we originally planned, but she's there. We got loans, scholarships, and with what we recovered from the restitution fund and your personal contribution, we were able to pay for her entire first year. That meant the world to us. After he walked away, Monica looked at me with a small, quiet smile. You did a truly good thing establishing that fund, Matthias. You absolutely didn't have to. Gabriela used my name to hurt these people, I said, my gaze distant. I simply couldn't live knowing my name was associated with her damage without doing everything I could to correct it. 2 years after Gabriela's death, I received a letter in the mail. The sender was Camila. I almost threw it straight into the trash without opening it, but some deep-seated instinct made me stop. Inside was a handwritten letter. Matthias, I don't expect you to read this, much less respond, but my therapist says writing this is a vital part of my process. So here it is. I want to apologize. Not the forced, legal apology from the lawyer, but a real one, from my heart. I knew Mom was cheating on you. I knew she was cynically using you, and I convinced myself it was okay because everyone does that, or because you could afford it, or whatever pathetic excuse I told myself at the time. The brutal truth is, I was jealous of you. Jealous that Mom had to pretend to respect you when she never had to pretend anything with me. Jealous that your life seemed so stable and organized when mine always felt chaotic and fake. So when I finally had the chance to be complicit in hurting you, I took it, and I hated myself for it even while I was doing it. I now work at a call center earning $9 an hour. I live in a tiny studio apartment that I can barely afford, and I have finally learned what it feels like to earn a living with my own two hands. I honestly understand the immense value of what you built and what Mom and I stole from you. Not just financially, but emotionally. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand the full horror of what we did, and that if I could go back in time, I would have done everything so differently. Camila. I read the letter 3 times. It sounded genuine. Maybe, just maybe, she had really changed. Or maybe she had just learned to write a far more convincing apology. I didn't reply to the letter, not because I was still angry, but because there was truly nothing left to say. That agonizing chapter of my life was finally closed. Camila would have to live with her choices now, just as I had learned to live with the consequences of trusting the entirely wrong people. I put the letter in the same drawer where I had kept Gabriella's diary, the pictures from our wedding, all the few physical remnants of those 12 years of my life. Someday, perhaps, I could look at those things without feeling anything at all. I wasn't there yet, but I was definitely closer than before. 3 years after Gabriella's death, I finally put the house on the market and sold it. Not because I needed the money, but because every single room still carried contaminated, toxic memories. Memories of a life that had never actually been real. I sold it to a nice young couple with 2 small children. I watched them walk through the rooms, imagining their future unfolding there, and I felt a strange, quiet peace. This house, at least, would have a second chance with people who genuinely loved each other. I moved into a sleek, modern apartment in the city center. It was minimalist, functional, and completely, utterly mine, with no history, no ghosts. Monica had also made significant changes. She sold the huge mansion she had shared with Rodrigo and bought a much more modest house near excellent schools for her children. We continued to meet for coffee occasionally, a quiet friendship forged in the blistering fire of shared betrayal. The kids asked me about their father yesterday, she told me during one of our coffees. Not about the fraud or the affair, but they genuinely wanted to know if he ever truly loved them. What did you tell them? That yes, in his own complicated way. That people can love and hurt simultaneously. That his love for them doesn't excuse what he did, but it doesn't completely invalidate it either. She sighed. I don't know if that's the right answer for them, but it's the only honest one I have for myself. I reflected on that. I think Gabriella loved me in her own way too. A selfish, superficial, deeply conditional way, but I believe it was the only form of love she was actually capable of giving. Does thinking that help you? I don't know if help is the right word, but it did help me stop endlessly wondering what I did wrong, or what I could have changed. The answer is nothing. There was nothing to change. She was who she was from the beginning. My financial consulting firm absolutely thrived without the enormous emotional distractions of the fraudulent marriage. I focused completely on my work. We expanded into 2 new cities, hired 20 more employees, and tripled our revenue. But most importantly, I completely changed the company's culture. I implemented exhaustive controls, independent quarterly audits, and absolute transparency in every single transaction. Never again would I allow my name to be associated with fraud, not even accidentally. I also established a nonprofit foundation to help victims of financial fraud. It wasn't huge or flashy, but it helped real people with free legal advice and much-needed support to navigate the complexities of recovering their losses. It's your way of actively turning poison into medicine, my therapist wisely observed during one of our sessions. After 2 years, I had finally accepted that I desperately needed professional help to process everything. I suppose so, I admitted. Gabriella made me a victim. Now I help other victims. There's a certain symmetry to that. And there's also deep healing. You are taking your most painful, devastating experience and consciously using it to create something positive in the world. That is genuine growth. One spring day, 4 years after the accident, I received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "A long overdue apology." The sender was Daniel, Gabriella's brother. I hadn't had contact with him since shortly after the funeral. Matthias, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wouldn't blame you at all if you deleted this message without reading it, but I need to tell you something I should have said years ago. I knew. Not about the financial fraud. That genuinely shocked me as much as it did you, but I knew about Rodrigo. I saw the way they looked at each other at family gatherings. I overheard suspicious phone conversations, and I never, ever told you anything. I convinced myself it wasn't my place, that I had no real proof, that maybe I was just misinterpreting everything. But the real truth is, it was just easier not to say anything. Easier to keep the family peace than to do the right thing and warn you. When they died and the whole truth came out, I absolutely hated myself for my silence. I've been in therapy trying to understand why I valued my sister's comfort over your well-being. I don't have a good answer. I just desperately wanted you to know that I profoundly regret my cowardice. You deserved so much better from your in-laws. You deserved better from all of us. Daniel. I read the email several times. It felt profoundly, truly genuine. No excuses, no attempts to minimize his complicity, Just raw, painful honesty. I replied briefly, "Thank you for the honesty. I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying that resentment is simply too heavy." His reply came minutes later. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I accept it with deep humility. I hope you find the peace you deserve, Matthias." That night, for the last time in years, I took out the pictures from my wedding with Gabriella. I really looked at them, without the filter of pain or blinding anger, just looking at the two people we were. We were so young in these pictures. I was 30. Gabriella was 28. We looked genuinely happy. Maybe she really had been happy at first, before her own immense greed and deceit took over her entire identity. Or maybe it had all been an act from the very beginning. I would never know for sure. And finally, after 4 long years, I was completely okay with not knowing. I put the pictures away again. I didn't throw them out. They were a part of my story, for better or worse. But I no longer needed them to remember who I was, or what I had learned. 5 years after the accident, the financial investigation was finally, officially closed. Lucia Vargas had been sentenced to 6 years in prison. All recoverable funds had been distributed to the victims. All the legal cases were resolved. Patricia called me with the final news. "It is all officially over, Matthias. The case is completely closed." "Thank you for everything," I said sincerely. "I know it was an immense amount of work." "It was the most complex case of my entire career," she replied. "But it was also the most important. We helped real people get their lives back. That's what really matters." That night, Monica organized a small dinner. Just the two of us and her kids, who were now 12 and 14. Bright, resilient children who had processed their father's betrayal far better than many adults. "Mom says you were Dad's friend," the older boy, Andreas, with his mother's intelligent eyes, told me. I confirmed. Or I truly thought I was. "Are you still mad at him?" I thought carefully about how to answer. These children deserved honesty, but they also deserved the chance to form their own opinions of their father. I was angry. I finally said, extremely angry. But anger is like carrying heavy stones. Eventually, you have to put them down, or they will completely crush you. So I put them down. "Does that mean you forgave him?" "It means I decided not to let his choices continue to define my life. I don't know if that's exactly forgiveness or just survival. Probably a little bit of both." Andreas nodded thoughtfully. "Mom says something similar. That dad made truly bad choices, but that doesn't mean we have to let those choices ruin our lives." "Your mom is very wise." Monica smiled at me from across the table. We had both come an incredible distance, from shattered victims to people who had consciously rebuilt their lives with intention and purpose. After dinner, while I was helping to clear the dishes, Monica asked me, quietly, "Do you ever think about dating again? About finding someone new?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But the idea of trusting someone like that again is just so hard." "I know," she said. "I feel the exact same way. But not everyone is like them, Matthias. Not everyone lies and betrays. That's what my therapist keeps telling me." "Therapists are usually right," I smiled back. 6 months later, I accepted a blind date arranged by a colleague, a woman named Andrea, a high school math teacher, divorced, with no children. The date was pleasant. There were no immediate fireworks, no instant, terrifying connection, just an easy conversation and genuine, easy laughter. We had a second date, then a third. After the fifth, when she kissed me goodnight, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years, possibility. "You need to know everything about me," I told her on our 10th date, before things could progress further. "My wife cheated on me for years. She used me to commit massive fraud. She died with her lover and left me with trust issues so monumental that they will probably never fully go away." Andrea looked me directly in the eyes. "My ex-husband was a severe gambling addict. He lost all of our savings, mortgaged our house without telling me, and then disappeared, leaving me with $300,000 in debt and a mountain of shame. So I have massive trust issues too." We simply looked at each other across the table. Two profoundly broken people trying to figure out if we could possibly build something new with our damaged pieces. "Do you want to try anyway?" I asked. "Slowly," she said. "Very slowly, with absolute, complete honesty about everything." "I can do that," I promised. And we did. Slowly, carefully, with the kind of deliberate, painstaking communication that only people who have been utterly devastated can truly appreciate. Every fear was expressed. Every insecurity was openly shared. Every small step toward vulnerability was celebrated as the huge victory it was. It wasn't the fake, fairy tale romance I had had with Gabriella. It was much, much better. It was real. 7 years after the accident, I woke up in my apartment on a perfect Saturday morning. Andrea was already in the kitchen, making coffee. We had been living together for 6 months, a massive step we had both approached with caution. My phone vibrated with a message from Monica. "The kids want to know if you and Andrea are coming to Andreas's soccer game today and pizza afterwards." I replied yes. This was my family now, not by blood, but by conscious choice. People who had seen me at my absolute worst and decided to stay anyway. While I was drinking coffee with Andrea, talking about nothing important, a profound realization hit me. I was happy, not in the naive, ignorant way I had been happy with Gabriella. This was a deeper, more conscious, more valuable happiness. The hard-won happiness of someone who had walked through the most terrible fire and emerged on the other side. Scarred, yes, but infinitely stronger. Gabriella had tried to destroy me. Camila had been complicit. Gabriella's family had judged me without a shred of truth. And yet, here I was, not destroyed, but perfectly rebuilt. That afternoon, while I watched Andreas score a goal and celebrate with his teammates, while Monica cheered loudly and Andrea held my hand, I understood the final, simple truth. The best revenge hadn't been canceling Gabriella's funeral, or cutting off Camila's inheritance, or even exposing the massive fraud publicly. The best revenge, the sweetest victory, had been surviving, healing, and building a life better, deeper, and more real than the lie they had tried to sell me. 10 years after the accident, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. The name on the envelope genuinely surprised me. Camila Ramirez. Inside was a handwritten note. I know you probably don't want to come, and I would completely understand why, but I'm getting married to someone who has taught me what real love and absolute honesty mean. I'd really like you to meet him, if you're willing. Not to reconcile, but just so you can see that I finally, truly learned my lesson. No pressure at all. Camila. I showed the invitation to Andrea. We had been married for 3 years now, after a small, quiet ceremony with only our closest friends and Monica with her children. Do you want to go? Andrea asked gently. I honestly don't know, I admitted. Part of me is intensely curious. Did she really change? Or is this just another manipulation? There's only one way to find out, Andrea said. We decided to go, motivated more by curiosity than any real desire for reconnection. The wedding was modest, held in a public garden with perhaps 50 guests. Nothing remotely like the garish extravagance Camila would have demanded years ago. Camila saw us arrive and immediately approached, nervously. She looked genuinely different, thinner, yes, but also more authentic in a way. Less makeup, simpler clothes, a smile that didn't look calculated. You came, she said, genuine surprise in her voice. I honestly didn't think you'd actually come. Andrea convinced me, I admitted. Who's the lucky guy? His name is Miguel. He's a high school teacher. I met him in a support group for people who have been involved in criminal activities and are trying desperately to rebuild their lives. That sounds like a very good place to start, I noted. It was. He knows absolutely everything about Mom, about the fraud, about what I did and what I didn't do, and he accepted me anyway, but with major conditions, continuous therapy, complete honesty, and living strictly within our real means. She smiled shyly. It turns out that living honestly is so much less stressful than living a lie. It's the hardest lesson I've ever had to learn. She paused, her eyes meeting mine. Matthias, I know I told you this in a letter years ago, but I have to tell you in person. I am so sorry for everything. I'm sorry for being complicit in Mom's affair. I'm sorry for happily accepting stolen money. I'm sorry for being a completely horrible person to you when all you ever did was take care of us. I believe you, Camila, I said, and I meant it completely. And I truly wish you happiness. Real happiness, not the cheap, fake version that you and your mother were relentlessly chasing. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Thank you. That means more to me than you could ever possibly know. The wedding was simple, but profoundly genuine. Miguel turned out to be a quiet, thoughtful man who clearly loved Camila, but didn't idolize her. During the reception, I overheard them discussing their honeymoon budget, a cheap bus trip to the nearby mountains. The old Camila would have thrown a fit and demanded the Bahamas minimum. People really can change, Andrea observed softly as we drove home that night. Some can, I agreed, when the pain of staying the same finally becomes greater than the fear of changing. Do you ever regret how you handled everything? Being so harsh. I considered this carefully. No, being harsh saved my life. If I had forgiven easily, if I had given in to that family pressure to keep the peace, I would have remained a victim. Sometimes, the most important compassion you can have is the compassion you show to yourself. Andrea nodded. My therapist says something similar, that forgiveness is vital, but never at the expense of your own sanity. At home that night, I took out the box that contained all the toxic remnants of my marriage to Gabriella for the very last time. The diary, the pictures, the letters, everything I had kept for 10 years, unable to throw it away, but also unable to fully process it. Now, finally, I was ready. Are you going to burn it all? Andrea asked, watching me go through the contents. No, I said. I'm just going to put it up in the attic. It happened. It was a part of my life. It taught me invaluable lessons. But I no longer need to look at it or think about it. I sealed the box shut and carried it up to the attic, not with anger or pain, but with simple, quiet acceptance. Gabriella had been a chapter in my story, but she no longer defined my present or my future. The following year, Andrea and I adopted a little girl. She had lost her parents in a car accident, eerily similar to how Gabriella and Rodrigo died. She was 8 years old, traumatized, and desperately needed a stable, loving home. Monica helped us navigate the process, sharing the lessons she had learned raising her own children through trauma. The most important thing, she advised, is age-appropriate honesty. Kids always know when you're lying, and after living one enormous lie, you never want to build your new life on more lies. Our daughter, whom we named Elena in honor of someone Andrea had lost, eventually asked me the truly tough questions. "Why don't you have pictures of your first wife?" she asked me one day, looking at the family photos in our living room. "Because that marriage ended very badly," I answered honestly, meeting her gaze. She lied to me about very important things. And when she died, I simply decided not to keep her pictures where I could see them every day. "Were you mad at her?" "Very angry. But eventually, I decided that being angry only hurt me, not her. So, I deliberately let go of the anger and built this new life." Elena nodded, her expression serious. "Like how I have to let go of the anger I feel at the driver who crashed into my parents' car." "Exactly like that, sweetheart. Anger is a normal, healthy feeling, but you cannot live there forever." 14 years after the accident, Gabriella's mother died. Daniel called me to inform me, not expecting me to attend the funeral, but feeling obligated to notify me. "I won't be going," I said simply. "I understand. I just thought you should know." Right at the end, before she passed, she mentioned your name. She said she was deeply sorry for how they treated you, and that she was sorry for not believing you. Too late to matter now, but thank you for telling me. After hanging up, I realized I felt absolutely nothing about the news. Not satisfaction, not sadness, not even any additional sense of closure. Just nothingness. And I knew that was perfectly okay. That night, during our family dinner, Elena told us about a school project on personal heroes. "I'm going to write about you, Dad," she announced proudly. "Why me?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Because when something really bad happened to you, you didn't give up. You didn't become a bad person. You became stronger and better. That's what real heroes do." I looked at Andrea, who was smiling at me with tears in her eyes. Then I looked at Elena, this incredible little girl we had welcomed into our lives, who had given us far more than we had ever given her. "I'm not a hero, sweetie," I said softly. "I'm just someone who decided not to let bad people turn me into a bad person, too." "That's exactly what makes someone a hero," Elena replied with the simple, pure certainty of children. Maybe she was right. Maybe real heroism wasn't about huge, grand gestures or elaborate revenge schemes. Maybe it was simply about getting up every single day and consciously choosing health over pain, growth over resentment, and love over fear. 16 years after the accident, Camila invited us to meet her newborn son. They had moved into a small, simple house in the suburbs, living on Miguel's teacher's salary and Camila's part-time earnings from a bookstore job. "We named him Matthias," Camila said as I held the tiny baby. "I hope that's okay. We wanted to honor. We wanted him to have the name of someone who represents real integrity." I was stunned, surprised to the point of tears. "I'm honored, Camila. I truly am." "I've been thinking a lot about Mom lately," Camila said, watching Miguel play with the baby. "About how she lived her entire life chasing what she thought would make her happy. Money, luxury, a secret romance. And she died without ever having experienced a single day of true peace. Some people never learn to distinguish between cheap pleasure and real happiness. I was almost one of those people. If I hadn't faced real, hard consequences, if people like you hadn't held firm, unbreakable boundaries, I probably would have followed Mom's exact path." She looked at me directly, her eyes clear. "You saved my life by being cruel. I finally understand that now." "I wasn't trying to save you," I said gently. "I was only trying to save myself." "I know, but you saved me anyway." As we were driving home that night, with Elena asleep peacefully in the back seat, Andrea took my hand. 16 years ago, did you ever, in your wildest dreams, imagine you'd end up here? Happy, married again, with a daughter, and being honored by the person who betrayed you?" "Never," I admitted. 16 years ago, all I wanted was to survive the next day. I couldn't see anything beyond the pain. "But you did, Matthias. You survived, and you built all of this." I looked through the windshield at the road, lit by our headlights, the darkness behind, the clear light ahead. It was a fitting, perfect metaphor for the entire harrowing journey. Today, I look back with absolutely no regrets. Gabriella cheated on me, used me, and planned to destroy me financially and emotionally. Camila was complicit. Gabriella's family judged me without knowing the truth. And yet, all those betrayals taught me the most valuable, painful lessons of my entire life. I learned that real love does not require you to ignore blatant red flags. I learned that holding boundaries is not cruelty. It is essential self-care. I learned that people will always show you exactly who they are if you just pay attention. And I learned that surviving is simply not enough. You have to consciously decide to thrive. The funeral I canceled, the inheritance I denied, the truth I exposed. It was all part of the necessary process of taking back my life from people who thought they could take it without consequence. It was not revenge. It was justice. It was survival. It was choosing myself when absolutely no one else would. And now, years later, surrounded by people who love me honestly, raising a daughter who deeply understands the difference between true strength and cruelty, married to a woman who values the truth as much as I do, I can honestly say, it was worth every single painful moment. What if the people you thought were the heroes in your life were actually the master manipulators, and the painful truth of their betrayal was the only thing that could save you? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments.